Hey guys, I'm Jenny. I am the host of the Mind Your Subconscious podcast, which is a podcast that provides you with the techniques and the knowledge to help you master the most powerful and the biggest part of your brain, which is your subconscious mind. Every single week, we invite experts from the fields of meditation, hypnosis, EFT, NLP to help you master the best part of your brain and to help you create a reality that's better than your wildest dreams. This week, I spoke to David Lyon, who is also known as Lionism on YouTube and on Instagram, and we talked about channeling. We talked about who he channels, what he channels, and how he teaches channeling to others and to everybody who wants to, pretty much. And the best part of the interview, he channeled for all the listeners so they can hear the message that they need to hear right now. It was an incredible interview. I'm so excited to share this with you. So go ahead, give it a listen, and I'm going to give it up to the interview now. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Okay, it's recording. All right. Hey, everybody. Today I'm here with David Lyon. And please go ahead and introduce yourself.
What's going on, everybody? So, as she said, my name is David Lyon, and I guess you could say I'm very passionate about mysticism and all the things that a lot of people don't believe in. So, what I do for a living is I'm a mystic, I'm a psychic, I'm a channeler, as well as hypnosis, and occasionally I do illusions as well. I started off as a street magician.
Okay, awesome. So let's get into how you got started with let's start with the hypnosis, because that's how you got started first, right?
Kind of. Actually, I got started with street magic.
Okay.
So, like how I got into it, that's what you're asking? Well, the short story is that I was 16 years old, and I was just kind of at that place in my life where I was looking for what made me special. I wanted to know what my thing was. All the popular people seemed to have a thing, whether they were rappers or basketball players. And so eventually I ended up seeing David Blaine on TV. And I don't know if you're familiar with David Blaine, but he's a famous street magician. And so when I saw him on TV, it was the first time that I had ever seen street magic and this ability to go up to people and just use everyday objects and blow their minds. And so immediately when I saw that, I was just like, that's what I want to do. And from there, it was just synchronicity. It was just life putting certain things on my path that ended up giving me the tools and everything I needed to become a street magician. And from there it just evolved. I went through a lot of life. From there it evolved into me learning the arts of mentalism, and then eventually hypnosis, which was in 2008, when I got invited to fly down to Vegas by one of David Blaine's teachers, who had seen my magic videos on YouTube and was just like, I really feel like you're meant to be here. We're actually going to be learning not just magic, but we're going to be learning hypnosis from the world's fastest hypnotists. And
Amazing.
yeah. So that's how I got started. This is obviously a very condensed version of the story, but like I flew down to Vegas, and at that time, I didn't know anything about hypnosis other than what I saw on TV as a kid. But I didn't know that hypnosis was supposed to take like 15 to 20 minutes of relaxation to get someone in a trance. My introduction was with the world's fastest, who was able to hypnotize anyone in less than a second. So I thought that's how it was supposed to go. So I got hypnotized by, it was a father and son, and the son was 12 years old. So I got hypnotized by a 12-year-old boy for my first experience. And that kind of made me go, okay, I want to know what's up with this, because he hypnotized me very quickly, took away my fear of spiders at the time, and then taught me their technique, which is called the zap technique. And when they taught me it, for whatever reason, it came so easily to me. I was just going around hypnotizing everyone in the room, left, right, and center, but I couldn't understand for the life of me why it was working. Like, why is it I could do this so quickly? And then that's what began my obsession with hypnosis, was to understand all the ins and outs.
So until that point, from an outsider perspective, it seems all to be very scientific. But how did you then get into the spiritual side of hypnosis and everything else?
So, that's always been within me since I was a kid. I may not have called it that, but I came in to this world a very awakened kid. My gifts were very in tune. And so I've always been extremely clairvoyant. You know, I was the type of kid who saw things that other people didn't see, and felt things that other people didn't feel, and so on and so forth. And so I didn't realize that those were gifts at the time, but it did cause me a lot of pain because I didn't realize that there was something unique happening. You know, because one of my unique gifts is I've always been able to read people's minds, and and when I say that, a lot of people think, you know, like, all right, well, you know, what am I thinking then? And it's not exactly that, because it's not exactly the words you're thinking, but the vibrations you're giving off. And you give off different vibrations in the different layers and levels of your mind. So consciously there's a vibration, and subconsciously and unconsciously. And so I can very easily and naturally pick up on those different vibrations, and that translates to language and imprints to me. And where that caused me pain as a kid is, because I was a very different kid. I wasn't really like into sports like the other kids, or I was always in my imaginary world, basically, imaginary. And I like, for example, I remember one time where I was just drawing, because I used to be into cartooning, and I was just drawing in my own world, and everyone else was doing their own thing. And one of my family members came up to me, and she's like, "Huh, what are you doing there, David?" But I heard her mind say, "What's wrong with you, David?" and and I would constantly experience that kind of double talk with people, not understanding what was going on or why people were speaking to me that way. And and because everyone was perceiving this problem with me, it made me to start to look for a problem that was never really there. And so that began wounding. And then at some point, just through growing up, I started to go through self-rejection, because I thought there was this problem. And as I went through self-rejection, that's when I started to dim out my gifts, and dim out that part of me that was in tune with my gifts. And then I went through being lost and trying to find myself. And so that continued through my teen years and through my early 20s. And it wasn't until I was 25 that I ended up having an experience with my first psychic, who at the time, I didn't even know if I believed in psychics, let alone realizing that everybody has psychic gifts. And so, I had this experience with a psychic where, I went to his house for, to get my girlfriend some help at the time. And at the time, I just thought, my girlfriend was telling me she was seeing spirits, and I thought she was crazy. And I heard of this healer guy, and I thought he was crazy. So I'm like, you know what, let me put two crazy people together. Maybe they could help each other. That was my mindset at the time. Clearly, I was very arrogant. And so they helped each other. I mean, he helped her, and it was brilliant. It was amazing what I saw. And then I just thought nothing of it. I just, I paid him his money. And as I was leaving, all of a sudden he closed his eyes and he turned to me, and he was just like, "We have information for you." And I was just like, who the heck is we? Like, I was so thrown off. And then he just started channeling and reading me, and he started to tell me all these things about myself that I forgot about. He's like, "You think you're this macho, impressive magician who's a celebrity who gets girls and this, that, and the other, but really the real you is soft and sensitive and really wants to help people, and you have all kinds of gifts that you forgot about that are similar to mine." And I didn't know what he was talking about at the time in terms of gifts, but what he most gave me in that moment was resonance. It was the first time I had felt resonance in so long, because I was feeling empty at that point in my life. I was trying to fill a void. And what he most gave me was this distinction between who I thought I was, this macho dude, and who I truly was, the sensitive, gifted, wanting to help people. And he left me with this idea that the sooner I let go of who I think I need to be, the sooner I become who I truly am again. And so that's when my gifts all started to come back online. And then naturally, it just started to integrate into everything else I was doing, such as street magic and hypnosis.
Wow. Okay. So how did you then integrate your gifts into hypnosis and street magic?
It was more so on the hypnosis side. Like, I mean, on the street magic side, I would use my gifts to read people in other ways to enhance certain effects. But with hypnosis, I had a very powerful experience. Well, there was a number of experiences, but there was one in particular that really stood out to me, and I have it on camera, which is really cool. Where, so I was doing up until that point, I was doing street hypnosis. So I was purely doing it for entertainment, you know, making people believe I was a celebrity or forget their name and stuff like that. And I was also at that, I was 24 at this point, 24, 25. And no, I must have been after 25 because 25 was the awakening. So around 25. And so at this point, I was so egotistical still that I really didn't care about helping people. That wasn't like, it wasn't at the forefront of my mind. Like, I'm like, I got my own problems. I don't want to deal with other people's problems. And one day I had this experience where I was at home, and at the time I lived with my mom and my younger brother, who was 6 years younger than me. And it wasn't uncommon for my brother to invite people over, his friends, to get hypnotized by me. And so that's what happened. He invited a bunch of friends over, like a couple girls and their boyfriends and stuff. And then we were in my room, and I was doing hypnosis, and we're filming this. So I dropped them all into trance, and I had them doing some funny things. And at some point, I didn't realize the language I was saying, but I had said something to the three girls who were hypnotized. I had said, I want you to go to a place that feels like heaven, not realizing that one of the girls, her mom had just passed away. And so all of a sudden, you know, what went from like comedy and entertainment, when I said that, all of a sudden you just see the girl with her eyes closed. She's just like, Mommy. And she reaches out and she grabs and she hugs. And I was just like, I'm kind of looking. And then the boyfriend looks at me. He's just like, her mom passed away, you know? And I was just like, oh crap. And so now everyone's looking at me like, what are you going to do, Mr. Hypnotist? You know? And you know, but obviously when something that like that happens, your heart kicks in, right? And so my heart kicked in, and I just freestyled this journey for her where I allowed her to have a final conversation with her mom and get closure ultimately, like say things she never got to say, get advice she never got to hear, crack jokes. And once we felt that was complete, you know, I don't remember exactly how I ended, but, you know, brought closure to it. And then continued, you know, I just didn't know what to do. So I continued with like one or two more entertainment skits. And then when it came to the awakening, I did what I always do, which is on the count of 10, when you wake up, you're going to have complete amnesia for everything that just happened until the moment you shake my hand. You know, that's just one of my finales. And so I did that, woke her up, woke everyone up. And so on the count of 10, eyes open, and we're all just looking at the girl to see like what her reaction is going to be. And then like, so she wakes up and we're all looking at her, the camera's on, and she's just like, why is everyone looking at me? She's like, what's with the camera? And then she's like, why is my face wet? And I'm just like, so you don't remember anything? She's like, no, I think I fell asleep on you. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, anyways, well, thank you for doing this with me. And I put my hand out. And as soon as she shook my hand, she was just like, oh my God, I just felt my mom. I'm going to do everything to pass the cool. I'm going to do everything to make her happy. I'm going to become the best person I can be. And it was just this moment for her that like brought all of us to just chills and tears. And it was that moment for me that like changed everything and made me see that hypnosis was so much more than just an entertainment tool, but it's literally a bridge to the spirit world and can be used for so many great things. You know, it's like that old quote from Spider-Man of like, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. You know, so that was definitely the catalyst that got me to be more spiritually focused, I guess you could say. And then, you know, from there I did have some other experiences that ignited more of that, you know, but yeah, I could talk about them if you want, but that was basically the turning point.
That was a beautiful experience. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I had like my eyes teared up and everything. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it's
So
beautiful.
let's get into the channeling side. How did you get into that then?
Mm.
What experience? Maybe you have another beautiful experience to share. What you
I got so many stories. So channeling was interesting. So in 2012, when my gifts reawoke, what happened was that same guy who gave me the reading, he ended up becoming a mentor. And you know, and he had told me, he's like, look, he's like, at some point we're gonna wake your gifts back up and teach you more about this world. But first you need to balance your ego because you're cocky as F. You know, I don't know if I can swear on here, but like you're too cocky. and he was very right. And so first I spent a good year just learning how to balance my ego, become more humble, and I learned how to release insecurities and just become more of the authentic version of myself. I guess basically so I didn't power trip once I got powers. And so after about a year of that, during that year, I also saw him do so many magical things, you know, with like reading minds and psychic abilities and all these things. So I was very convinced that this stuff was real. There was no more skepticism left in me because I was just like, okay, I want to know how to do that. But it didn't seem in reach. It seemed like something only he can do or only special people can do, you know, but he always kept telling me, he's like, no, he's like, you do this very naturally. You just don't remember. And I'm like, okay, you know. And so after a year, he invited me into his energy class, where he hand selected a few people. And he had told me, he's just like, by the way, don't worry. He's like, this is actually going to be very easy for you, probably easier than anyone else. And I was so mad at him for saying that. I was just like, don't be an asshole, bro. Like, just tell me it's going to take a lot of work. You don't need to give me that pat on the back. He's like, no, you don't understand. You're just remembering what you forgot. It's already natural to you. I'm like, all right. And so he led us through, one of the first things he did is he led us through this exercise. And I've created my own version of this exercise on my YouTube channel for whoever wants to check it out. It's called Soul Magic. But it's essentially, it's an exercise that reactivates and re-stimulates and resensitizes all our dormant senses that we may have numbed as a child. Because when we're kids, because we don't know how to deal with pain, we numb ourselves. We suppress it, we numb ourselves in order to forget about it. But when we do that, we're also numbing certain sensitivities, certain sensors of ours that connect us to our light body, to our higher self and other gifts. So this exercise, what it does is it re-stimulates, reawakens, and reignites those senses so that your gifts turn back on. And it works very quickly. You only need to do it once, maybe twice. You know, for me, it was one time. Some people, it was 2 times. And so I did it one time. And after doing it, you know, I just felt very high. I didn't notice anything yet. But then when he started to give us certain practices to do, he was just like, okay, now try and read Rita's mind and tell me about, you know, her likes and dislikes. And he gave us a way of doing it. I'm like, all right. And I would, you know, tune into my intuition, and I'm like, okay, what are her strengths, whatever. And then all of a sudden in my mind, it was just like, da, 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 da. Like all this information just dropped in. And I was just like, and I knew it wasn't thought. Like I did not think anything. And then I fed it back to her. And this was a woman I never met. And she was just like, how did you know that? You know? And so that starts to build my own belief system in my own knowing. And then more things started to turn on. And all of a sudden I started to perceive spirit guides again and angels. So it started with that. It started with me reawakening my senses and just getting back in tune with what was already natural to me. And eventually I started to teach my own classes, because I began to realize this was part of my purpose as well. That's why he invited me into the class. And it was through that my channeling started to develop, because what would happen was, it happened in stages. So I would bring people into my class. It felt a lot like X-Men, you know, like, I don't know if you've seen the movie X-Men, where Professor Xavier, he finds these gifted people who don't know how to properly use their gifts. You know, their gifts feel like a curse. So he finds them, he's like, no, this is actually a blessing. This is how you're meant to use them. So it felt like I was playing X-Men, and invited these people in. And the way it would happen was, I would have everyone in my class in my living room, and I would just, you know, I didn't have a thought of what to do. I would just ask my guides. I'm like, okay, what are we doing today? And then they would give me the lesson, and then I would teach it to them. So at first it started with me translating what they were telling me and feeding it back. So it wasn't me getting out of the way and letting them speak through me. It was them like whispering to me and I'm feeding it. So it started, that's what I call conscious channeling. So it started with being a translator, conscious channeling. And then eventually I saw this guy on YouTube named Bashar. Are you familiar with Bashar?
I've heard of him, but I don't think Yeah, I can't put a picture to his name
Right.
right now.
Well, whoever's listening, if you haven't heard of Bashar, look him up on YouTube. He's amazing. So he's basically a guy named Daryl Lanka who channels an extraterrestrial named Bashar. And what most appealed to me about him was that he says in one of his interviews, he's like, I don't care if you believe I'm channeling an ET or not. All I care is my information useful? And I'm like, okay, I like that. It's very grounded, and then when you watch him, and you're like, okay, he's definitely channeling an ET. And so what I loved about it is he was doing this different kind of channeling. It was trance channeling. He was completely out of the way, and this ET was speaking through him, and his eyes were closed and whatnot. So that built an excitement in me towards that. And that excitement energy, excitement is the energy of our higher self. And so whenever we feel that feeling of excitement, we're pulling more higher self energy towards us. So there's a reason why that was put in front of me. And so that excitement towards wanting to learn more about channeling, eventually what happened was I was teaching at a high school as well at the time. And even though I'm a school dropout and have no degree, that's a whole other story. But like, I was teaching at a high school, and my co-teacher, she randomly gave me this book that she was just like, I feel like you're meant to read this. And it was called The Emerald Tablets of and I didn't know how to pronounce it, so I said Thoth, Thoth. I'm like, who's Thoth? And she's like, oh, he's the Egyptian god of magic and wisdom. And I'm like, ooh, fascinating. So took it home, I read it, and it was an amazing read. Like, it was very like fascinating and inspiring and activating in certain ways, but I didn't think much of it. I was just like, okay, cool, good book. And I read it, and I went through it in about like 2-3 days. And then about, then time just went on, like forgot about it. And then about a week or so later, it was my birthday and I wanted to get a cat. And I mentioned this to one of my friends, and she's like, oh, no, 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 don't get a cat. My cat just had kittens. She's like, I'll send you a picture. And she sends me a picture of all these cats. And right away, one of the cats stood out to me. I'm like, oh, who's that one? And she's like, oh, that's Thoth. And I was just like, what? And, it was just like, what are the chances that someone names their cat Thoth? And I'm reading a book about Thoth, and so little did I know so he calls himself Thoth when he comes through me. That was Thoth's way of leaving a breadcrumb trail for me, letting me know what was going to happen in my life. And so what ended up happening is, I got my cat, and my cat ended up being my greatest teacher. So because at the time I got my cat, I was a different kind of person. I still had lots of anger and control issues and stuff like that in me. I was very rigid. But in order to connect with my cat, I had to learn to loosen up. So let's say my vibration was here. I had to learn to become more playful and more loose and more flowy. So I started to raise my vibration through my cat. And then once I got to a certain vibration, I I was high enough in vibration so that Thoth can descend without hurting himself too much. And he came and he showed up in my physical reality. And this happened on October 1st, 2015. Thoth literally showed up to me, and just as a gold body of light, he had the beak just like in the images, and let me know that we're going to be working together. And that's how my trance channeling started to begin, because he taught me more about real magic and the mechanics of our gifts. And that's when I really started to become more developed and experienced in understanding not just how to do it for myself, but how to teach others very simply and practically how to shift into those dimensions of themselves.
So when you teach others, before you teach them, do you already do something like reading their Akashic records to help them, or do you let them know about that? If you do that, how's your process?
No, I don't specifically work with, I mean, I guess I could say yes and no, because I don't work with any particular modality. I tune into source, and so yeah, when I work with someone, me specifically, I will, it depends. I'll usually read their field first. So when someone shows up to me for an ascension session, um, generally, you know, they might have a question they want to explore, but what I'm actually doing is when I go inside, I can feel your field very clearly. And so I get an imprint of what's at the forefront of your field that your soul's most wanting to bring attention to. And so I'll speak to that. And that's usually something in your unconscious or in your subconscious. And so that's how I do my readings is I read the field and I feed that information back in such a way that for me, it has to create resonance, you know, because like a lot of psychics I find could be a bit fluffy is what I call it, you know, where they'll say things that you can't really grasp, you know, but I'm very big on speaking in such a way that even my grandmother could understand, you know, so I start with reading their field usually. Um, and then from there, it depends on their wishes and desires, you know, like if they want to connect to more of their gifts and their guides, you know, I might have their guide show up and come through and give information. If there's certain things that I can't get through myself, I'll usually feel Thoth knock on my consciousness door and be like, let me handle this. And then I'll get out of the way and then Thoth will come through and then give the message. And it's a very different style of energy. You know, I could be more playful and childlike, and Thoth is very just like no nonsense, you know, just in your face, but still very compassionate. So it really depends. It depends on the person. But I like to, what I'm really big on is showing people how to connect to their magic, or another word for that is their mastery. You know, a lot of people go out there and they learn different modalities. You know, modality could be like Reiki or Akashic Records. You know, these are all different modalities that someone received naturally as their mastery, and then they taught it as a modality. But that could be very limiting, you know, if you're not in tune with your mastery first. So, you know, so for example, a psychic might tell you that, oh, you're designed to be a healer. And you're like, oh, that makes so much sense. But how do I do that? And then you go and you find Reiki. And then you're like, oh, this feels like everything I'm supposed to be doing. And you learn it. And it's great. It's great that you learn it. But you end up being limited by that modality because you don't know how to go beyond what you're taught. So what I love to do with people is tune them into their mastery, their unique mastery, so that that's the place where you create your own modalities from, and you have infinite access to tools and creativity. And then from there, when you do learn other modalities, you could take it and make it your own without feeling limited. So that's what I'm very big on.
Okay. And how can I phrase this? What are so let's say our listeners, they're listening and then they're thinking, okay, you know, maybe I want to tune into my own mastery. What can they do on their own before going to anybody? What can they do on their own to start their own journey?
Great question. The very simple answer is to really act on and live by their excitement and inspirations. Very simply put. And the reason why I say that is, you know, most people think like, oh yeah, you know, my excitement, you know, like, of course, you know, excitement is important, but if your highest excitement isn't the top priority in your life above everything else, it's because you don't fully understand what excitement is. That's my belief, you know, because if we look at things clairvoyantly and we look at the higher self is just a composition of energies. And the energies that it's composed of is passion, joy, creativity, love, excitement, inspiration. That's why it's called the higher self. It's all these higher frequencies. And one of the most dominant textures is excitement. So, you know, it's like being excited about excitement, being excited about joy, being excited about passion. So anytime you feel the sensation of excitement or inspiration or any of those higher feelings, that is the language of your higher self speaking to you, saying, hey, this way. You know, because it might not speak to you directly with words yet. You know, some people can't hear it yet. So it'll speak to you in energies that feel good to follow. So when you're receiving the energies of excitement and inspiration and all those things, by choosing to act on it without any expectation, first of all, you're tuning into where things are already figured out for you. So you don't need to figure anything out. So that alleviates the mind. You know, a lot of people are, I got to figure this thing out. Higher self's like, no, I got to figure it out for you. Excitement, inspiration, intuition, right? So you're tuning into where things are figured out for you. But the more you act on that energy, the more you're ingesting yourself, infusing yourself with that energy, you start to embody more of your higher self and awaken more of your higher self gifts on your own. So that's a very simple and practical way that people can do it.
Okay, great, beautiful. And what about channeling then? Where should you start? How should you start? Most importantly, what or whom should you speak to or channel?
Also a great question. Um, so same idea. It is, following your excitement, your intuition, your inspiration, following your higher self is a complete kit. Complete. So it'll activate within you everything that needs to be activated and reveal to you whatever needs to be revealed. It is going to give you everything that is your birthright. And it is also the organizing principle of your life, meaning by doing so, you don't need to figure things out or wonder what you should do first. It'll just tell you, go here, go there, go there. So it gives you everything. It's like being fed by an umbilical cord. So as you do so, you might notice certain gifts start to come online. And then from that space, you might see different people in your reality. Like, let's say you have an excitement to learn about channeling, well, maybe you'll see a teacher in front of you and that you're just like, you'll get the inspiration of like, I don't know why, but I want to learn from that guy, or I want to learn from that woman. And there's an excitement about it. There's an inspiration about it. And then maybe the mind will come in and will be like, oh yeah, but I don't know if I can do it. That's fear. Or, oh, I don't know, but money, fear, right? So then the question is, what are you going to choose to feed? Are you going to choose to feed the energy of your higher self that's just like, trust me, I got you, I see farther than you, I got the bird's eye view? Or are you going to feed the fear? So that's really that's really the going about it portion. Is it's so important to find people that you resonate with, not just people who have astonishing abilities, because a lot of people get caught in that trap. And that's something that I did myself, where people go see psychics, and because they have all these phenomenal gifts, they've kind of put them on a pedestal and they no longer listen to their own resonance. They're just like, well, this psychic told me that I'm meant to be with this person, or this psychic told me this. It's like, okay, but what did your own inner guidance tell you? Right? So it's so important to not just pay attention to the person's gifts, but take the gifts away. Do you like that person? Are you inspired by that person's beingness, by that person's shine? And so that's what I can give as guidelines in terms of how to navigate yourself towards learning certain things. And obviously I offer experiences like that as well, but it's following your inner guidance.
And what about if people are afraid that either something negative will come up or they will channel some negative energy or some negative being?
Oh yes, yeah, and that was the second part of your question. Yeah. So you cannot perceive what you're not the vibration of. Meaning, if your intention is of the highest good and just, wanting to give what people need, it's of the highest good, the highest love, then that is the vibration of beings that you'll attract. However, if your intention is superiority, let's say, like, oh, I want to be better than people, then you might attract beings with that agenda. So the idea is that even if you do that, so let's just say you do that unconsciously and you don't realize you have a superiority complex. God's not stupid. Source isn't stupid. So you still have guides that look after you, that will, how can I put it? You might seemingly get a guide that is no good. We'll just use those words. But even demons are just angels in Halloween costumes, right? Because if we're looking at things from a perspective of unity as opposed to duality, they might put on the cloak of being a negative entity just to teach you a lesson. And then once you learn that lesson, they could take off the cloak and shift their frequency because they're formless. So it's important to see things through a unity perspective. That way there's no fear of the duality. So that's number one. And number two is what I eventually learned is I prefer to connect directly to source. Some people will, they'll have certain guides come in and that's like their main guide and they'll always connect to that guide, which is fine. But what needs to be understood is that the purpose of your guides is to teach you how to be a better guide of yourself. That's all that they're there for. They're guiding you to know how to guide yourself so that you elevate your vibration so that it's easier for you to connect to source. So you can work with certain guides, but when you remember that you always have a direct connection to God, source, the universe, you can go directly to that space because it'll always be open for you. And there's methods for this. And from there, what I personally do is I'll either channel directly from source, or source will send me the guide that is most appropriate for that working. So for example, I like to give the analogy of imagine source is just this pure white light. And you've seen the imagery of the pure white light that passes through the prism, and then the Big Bang happens and it turns into 7 colors, right? So those 7 colors look unique and individual, but they're all from the same white light. And sometimes, giving the message to a person from source isn't exactly what they need, because it might be too pure. Maybe they need the message to be more assertive, more tough love, more firm, which is more of the violet color, let's just say, or maybe they need it more gentle. So I will always receive whatever guide is most appropriate, but sent from source. And so this is where there's all kinds of inner workings that a lot of people aren't aware of, because a lot of what people learn are just from books and knowledge. And so it's an incomplete teaching because it's not coming from your mastery. It's not coming from your wisdom. So you're not getting all the little subtleties.
So there was one time where me and my client, we also channeled the masters together, also with hypnosis. And then the message was, we humans, we always want more, right? We always want to connect more. We want to go deeper. We want to be more spiritual, all this stuff. So how do you find the balance of living on Earth, enjoying Earth, and learning the lessons you're supposed to learn, versus being in the spiritual and, so to say, not being on Earth and talking to outer earthly or extraterrestrials or whatever?
For me, it's by recognizing that there's no separation. There's no duality there for me. For me, being on Earth and being human comes with the package of being connected to the non-physical. Some people can have what's the word? Not a preference, not a charge, but kind of like I can't find the perfect word, but a want of like, oh, well, I want to learn how to astral project because that will make me more spiritual. But it's like that comes from this belief of not enoughness. So all you can attract is more of not enough. Where it's actually when you're the most grounded, that's when you have the most connection, because it's like a tree that has roots. When a tree has strong roots, it can climb higher. Which actually goes into the original teachings of hypnosis. What a lot of people, it took me 12 years to find this, but what a lot of people don't know is hypnosis was created by Osiris, the ancient Egyptian god Osiris, who's known as the god of the underworld. And underworld is another word for subconscious realms, right? And so what I learned through channeling is that hypnosis is just a misunderstood concept, which simply just means depth, right? It's rooting into your being, into your true core vibration, making your roots strong so that then you can go into enlightenment and go higher. So when people have this desire for something like, more spiritual, they're missing the spiritual that's right in front of them, because everything's spiritual. Like money is spiritual, the physical is it's all spiritual. So it's just a misunderstood belief in the head that's causing a duality, that's causing a separation.
Okay, great. Thank you for that explanation. And now, would you maybe demonstrate some channeling to our listeners, and maybe just say if there's any message that whoever is listening needs to hear?
Oh, cool. It would help if you give me like a prime, in terms of like what kind of I almost want to say like what kind of message, because I could go into so many different directions, like about people's gifts, about what's going on in the planet, about so if you give me a little bit more of a direction, it'll be.
Let's do what is going on the planet and what people should focus on right now during these times, and
Cool.
how we can come out as the best versions of ourselves after this.
Perfect. So in essence, the purpose of everything that's happening on the planet now is unity. To put it and wrap it in one word, it's simply unity. All these things are forcing us to come together in a very unique way that hasn't happened on the planet before. So even the idea of the coronavirus, as an example, the coronavirus itself also has a consciousness, just like everything else. So the idea is not to work against the coronavirus and fight it and want to beat it, but it's also to learn to work in harmony with the idea of the coronavirus by realizing what its purpose is. And the purpose of the coronavirus is simply to shift us into a new way of being. It's telling us that the way that we were living, the way that we were working is no longer working. Being so much hustle and grind, focused on doing these unfulfilling jobs, these playing small versions of our passions. What the coronavirus is teaching us as a spiritual lesson is to go deeper inside and to raise our frequency, because on some level, when you come into a harmony with yourself, into a higher frequency with yourself, the coronavirus can't harm you. And this is scientific. When we're in higher states of joy and we're in higher states of harmony, we produce the antibodies, we produce the enzymes, we generate the immune system that allows us to be healthier than the average person. And so what this coronavirus is doing is it's placing emphasis on the importance of that unity between ourselves and spirit, ourselves and life, ourselves and other people, so that we could come into higher states of harmony and alchemize our system from the inside out, so that we step into higher levels of health and immunity and so on and so forth. And so what people can most do to navigate themselves through this time is to learn the art of alignment. And what we mean by the art of alignment is to simply learn to be more open, to go into states of openness. And I'm going to break this down for you. So on the contrast, what a lot of people do is they even though they might know that life provides for them, they push against life. They're like, okay, I need to make this happen, because if I don't do it, nothing's going to happen. I need to hustle. I need to grind. That shows that there's not a full trust in life, because in truth, life will give you everything. And it's not only wanting to give you everything, it needs you to understand that it will give you everything so that you experience more harmony. Because when you realize that you could literally just sit back and receive clarity and receive guidance and receive inspiration, then that develops a type of harmony inside of you that allows you to move in a certain way, think in a certain way, behave in certain ways, that pumps out more harmonious frequencies for you and the people around you, right? So from that perspective, it is the best thing for you and the planet to come into harmony with life. So then the question becomes, okay, well, how do I do that? If you remember, when we were children, we just lived in these states of openness, right? When we lived in the states of openness and curiosity and wonder, and there was just something that led us through life. It was just like, I feel like doing this, and I feel like doing that. And then we get different ideas and different inspirations, and then our parents would provide, and life would provide, and everything was handed to us. That wasn't just because we were kids and that's what's supposed to happen. That's also because that was our vibration, that was our law of attraction at that point. That's how we were vibrating in reality before we became more conditioned to have to work for what we want when it was already given to us. So the idea is to let go of the need to figure things out, or to hustle, or to grind, or to look for what you need to go next, and imagine yourself like a plant where life is just trying to water you, and to allow yourself right now to begin to shift into a state of more openness. Openness meaning taking a moment right now and feel what it would feel like if you let yourself become more open and just let yourself receive the life force energy that's already flowing through you right now. You can feel those instreamings of life if you allow yourself to. if you don't push them aside. And as you just allow yourself to receive and realize that you don't need to give in order to receive, you can literally just receive. So as you go into a state of receptivity, of openness, you're going to start to feel more of the in-streamings of life force energy. And as you feel that, you let it nourish you. You let it breathe through you. You let it move you. And you just allow yourself to begin to follow the different pings in your consciousness that show up from that point. So as you're in receptive mode and you're just allowing yourself to receive life force energy, all of a sudden you might be like, you know what? I feel like taking a bubble bath. And the idea of taking a bubble bath might seem completely ridiculous to your mind because you have to do all these other things. But life is pinging you to take a bubble bath. And you know it's the right direction for you because it's also in the direction of a lighter feeling. It feels lighter to go towards the bubble bath. And for all you know, by going to that bubble bath, you'll be sitting in, you'll be raising your vibrational frequency into states of joy and gratitude and, oh, this feels good. And all of a sudden you come into vibrational harmony with inspiration. And inspiration drops in the bubble bath that tells you the next step. And you're just like, oh my God, this is what I need to do. And everything is literally being given to you without you having to look for it. You can literally do nothing and receive everything. This is what beingness is all about. This is what coming into harmony with life is all about. It's allowing yourself to receive the in-streamings of life force energy, letting it guide you, tell you what to do so that you don't need to figure things out. And that will create a ripple effect of more harmony and unity in the world that will raise your health, raise your immune system, raise your joy, expand your consciousness, develop your gifts, and bring you more into the experience of heaven on earth. Because at the end of the day, heaven is not a destination. It's a state of being. Heaven is a place inside yourself. It's a place inside the soul. And all it takes is the receiving of your intuition and inspiration and life force energies to experience life and reality in that way. Because whether you know it or not, there are many people like the person in front of you who experience heaven right now. There are many people who experience bliss every single day, ease every single day. Even through hardships, it doesn't have to feel so heavy when you don't have resistance to it and you understand it's just an emanation of life. And so the most important thing that you can do is to just let yourself receive, become open, and become joyfully open, become curiously open, become excited about, okay, where does life want to guide me to? And you'll feel little pockets opening up in your consciousness. Just follow those pings, follow those pockets. And yes, your mind might come in and be like, yeah, but just become aware, take a second and realize, is that a limitation? Is that a limiting belief? Does it feel heavier than the direction that's opening up for me? Because that's your cue to decide, what do you prefer to choose? What reality do you choose?
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Also had my eyes closed. Very
Awesome.
All right. Wow. I don't even know what to say next.
Was that helpful?
That was beautiful. Okay. So what is next for you? What do you have planned? If you plan, if you don't let yourself be guided, what is next?
Yeah, I don't plan. So what's next for me is just creation, I'm enjoying just unfolding myself. And one of those creations is I have a virtual retreat experience coming up called Opening to Channel for those people who want to learn how to tune into source themselves and get their own guidance and make it very easy to do so. Because a lot of people experience what I call flickery gifts, where like sometimes it's really on and they're just like feeling people's feelings and channeling and it's really fun and magical. And other times they're like, where did it go? Right? So that's just because there's not enough consciousness on the inner workings of your gifts, and you're not clear enough on your unique soul triggers so that you can know how to design your life around your magic. This is what I call living magic versus living struggle. So this experience that I have coming up, Opening to Channel, teaches you just that. It's a 7-day virtual retreat experience, since we can't be in person at the moment. And it's 3 hours a day done through Zoom in a group experience. And I will be channeling certain exercises and giving certain activations that are very simple, clear, and practical. And then there was going to be lots of hands-on practice and Q&A, so that by the end of the experience, the idea is that you feel a very clear and confident connection to source and your gifts, and knowing how to hear your spirit guides, and most importantly, just knowing how to navigate yourself through life, so that you're just clear on your own inner GPS that's already set towards the destination of heaven and fulfillment. So it's learning your magical gifts.
And when is that?
That is May 1st to May 7th. May 1st to May 7th.
Okay, awesome. Anything else?
If people want to check it out and find more information about that and me, they could go on my website, which is www.livingmagic.life. The experience will be greatly led by Thoth. So I'll be getting out of the way, letting Thoth come through. And that's a very unique and different energy I'm sure people will enjoy. In this case, what I was just doing earlier, that was more source channeling, and of course I'll be teaching as well. So you can go on livingmagic.life. And also, if you want to just receive lots of free content and free value and activations, I have lots of great stuff on my YouTube channel and my Instagram. You'll just find lots of, if you go on my YouTube, type in David Lyon, Lion, not Ly, Lion, you'll see there's activations and live streams, and same thing on my Instagram. It's at Lionism, lion like the animal, ism like Buddhism. And you'll see my IGTV's got lots of great content. That way you can get a better taste for this. You can see how simple things are. And then if you want to dive deeper, you can come to opening the channel.
Okay, awesome. Sounds great. So any words before we close?
Yeah, have fun. It's really important to have fun with yourself. A lot of people take these things too seriously. Even spirituality and the idea of gifts. It's like, okay, I'm going to learn gifts. I'm going to focus. I'm going to be a good student. When it's actually that energy of seriousness and rigidity that will block or hinder the energy and flow of your gifts, because spirit and your guides are very playful. They're very creative beings. So when you're serious and their vibrations here, it makes it harder. But when you have fun with life, you become more open to the textures and frequencies of life, and you could feel more of the subtle currents that are already there for you. Because you'll notice that when you have fun and you play more, you tune more into your essence, and you'll realize it's not so much about learning new gifts, but just tuning into the gifts that are there for you already. So I really believe very powerfully in the power of fun, and it just changes your life. It'll change everything. So really have fun with life. Let yourself play more. Let yourself realize that it'll lighten you up. Like the saying goes, the quickest path to enlightenment is simply to lighten up. Right? So let yourself lighten up more, and you'll have lighter feeling thoughts and have lighter actions and bring more light into the world. So it serves way more purpose than you realize to simply just have fun.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you so much for being here, for being on the podcast, for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you. I really, really, really appreciate you and your time.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.